This is my Homelite Super 2 chainsaw. My dad owned it as long as I can remember, probably when I was, well, since I was a kid or before. So it may be 40 years old, or who knows, really old. And the problem is that the chain's not getting oiled. I don't remember exactly what happened that caused it to fail, but I'm trying to get it working, and here's the way the oil system works on it. There's a little valve there called a duckbill valve, and it's basically like a check valve or a diode. A diode in electricity lets electrons flow one direction but not the other direction, and a check valve lets something flow one direction but not the other direction. And a duckbill valve, I think, is just really a specific variation on a check valve. So the way this thing works, the bar hooks on here, goes out that way. Here's the rear of the saw. And the way this works, I think, when the piston moves downward, it creates a positive pressure in the crankcase. And obviously then when it goes up, it creates a negative pressure in the crankcase. And so when the piston goes down, that crankcase pressure comes out the side here, goes through, there's a little mechanism in here, I don't know exactly what it does. It's like a filter, and I'm not sure exactly what. There's a little spring in there. I don't know exactly what it does, but the piston comes down, pressure comes out through here, or through the crankcase, through this mechanism, and then out this nipple right here that this hose is on. Then that hose comes into the oil tank, and there's the duckbill valve attached to the end of it, and the air squeezes out that duckbill valve into the oil tank. Then the piston moves the other direction and puts a vacuum on the crankcase, and so would put a vacuum on this line. Well, that duckbill valve prevents the air from going back through the line into the crankcase. So every time the piston comes down, there's a little puff of air that comes into the crank, or into the oil tank to pressurize it. Then this line, there's a metal thing at the end of this line in the bottom of the tank with a filter on it, and that's the pickup. And I guess the pressure forces the oil through that into here. I don't know if there's a little pump in the crankcase here, but the oil comes through here into the crankcase and then comes out of this fitting right here, and you can just see the end of that light colored line. That line comes around here and hooks on right here. And then the oil comes out here into the bar and oils the chain. So pressure out of the crankcase through here, one way through the check valve here, the duckbill valve, forced out through the pickup, through this tube, and the oil end would come through the crank, or through this casting, out of that fitting, just around under the carburetor here, and out to oil the chain. That's how that's hooked up. I imagine this duckbill valve got lost or fell off, I'm not sure, and so I tracked one down at a local small engine shop, and I think you can get them online too. And what I did, I bought a little tiny piece of brass tubing from McClendon Hardware, a local place here in Tacoma, and it was small enough the duckbill valve would fit on it, and it would fit into this tubing. It was actually a little loose on this tubing, so I made it long and pulled this back through the hole so that the hole would squeeze down onto it. You can see the brass there. So hopefully the force of tugging this back along with the brass tube through the opening will hold it in this tube fine, and hopefully the air pressure won't squeeze it or shoot it off the end of that tubing. I'll just have to keep an eye on the chain to make sure it's staying oiled. Or look in here, you just pop the cap off, and you could easily see if that duckbill valve is still there. So I'll need to keep an eye on that. I also thought about cleaning this off real well and just using some super glue to glue that. Make sure the end of this tube is cut really square, and just glue that duckbill valve straight onto the end of this. That's an alternative if it won't stay on that little piece of brass tubing. So we'll see if this works. See if it gets the chain oiled. But that's how you hook it up. In the general, it's the general plumbing of the chain oiler on this old Homelite Super 2.